Sorry about no upload yesterday. I got up at like 6 a.m. and left, and then didn't get back until like after midnight. So it was a very long day, very tired, and I was not going to at like 1 in the morning or 12:30 or whenever it was that I got done and was ready for bed, record some thoughts on the war in Ukraine, and then edit and upload it and go to sleep. But no matter, I will record my thoughts today, and we'll get them up, and all will be jolly good. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. So we got 2 airstrikes to talk about, or I guess 2, not airstrikes, bombings or missile strikes, whatever you want to call them, in Iraq and Western Ukraine. I guess the first thing I'll talk about is the Iraq thing. It's not that important in the grand scheme of things. Iran lobbed some missiles into Iraq, landed on the campus of the U.S. consulate in Erbil, which is the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. Yes, 20 years later, the U.S. Consulate in Iraq is still, one of their consulates, still under attack, still getting bombed. The situation is not stabilized. If there's, it's a great little, it's a great little analogy for just what a failure the Iraq War has been. Not that Iraqis themselves are the ones who launched these missiles. Obviously, it was Iran. Iran admits that. But it's just, like in 20 years, you couldn't turn this country into a stable, normal country. It's just pathetic. But anyway, at first, what this looked to me was a lot like the missile launch and, missile attack, whatever you want to call it, that Iran launched against the U.S. back when Trump was president. If you remember correctly, there was a series of a tit for tat after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani by the United States, which was ordered by President Donald Trump. I was not a fan of the assassination of Soleimani. I thought, why are you going and waging an act of war against Iran? What good is that going to do us? I understand it makes the Israel lobby very happy, but it does nothing to make Americans safer. And essentially, the culmination of that series of escalations after the killing of Soleimani, it culminated in the Iranians phoning Americans saying, "Hey, we're going to blow up, some base of yours in Iraq. You have 30 minutes to get your people out." They did that. Iran, they blew up this base, and just. It was an empty building. It didn't really matter, but it was a way of Iran trying to show that, hey, we responded to the killing of Soleimani. It's very similar to what Trump did in Syria back after the Duma hoax. He bombed an empty airfield, of course, gave the Russians and the Syrians full warning, and it was a media stunt. It's the same thing for Iran. Well, it looks like Iran did that again this time. Or at least that's what it appeared to me, because what we were told is that no Americans were harmed. And so it seemed like, especially since there was, I guess there was 4 days earlier, there was some tweet that I saw from Elent News, which Jack Posobiec, I think it was, the one who I saw highlighted this. Iran had some IRGC guys who were killed in Syria, and they said, "Oh, we're going to avenge these guys," and apparently this missile launch was supposed to be avenging their deaths. Very similar to what we got with Soleimani. Well, then there was a bit of a twist, because we learned, this attack actually wasn't directed at the Americans. They were trying to hit Israel. And then that brought up, well, wait, I thought this was at the U.S. consulate. Yes, apparently Israel is using the U.S. consulate in Erbil for some sort of either military or, spy type of purposes. Maybe I think they had maybe some kind of training camp or something. I don't know the exact details. But that doesn't matter. There was an Israeli presence at this consulate. The Iranians wanted to attack Israel and hit them, and so they hit them inside the U.S. consulate. Now, ordinarily, would Iran maybe hesitate to do this because, these particular Israelis were, behind the walls of the American consulate? They were sort of within an American space. Yeah, maybe they normally would, but as of right now, the U.S. is having to, get on bended knee and beg Iran to pump oil for them because the U.S. Is trying to, starve the entire planet of Russian oil, which will, of course, send oil prices to the moon because Russia represents a significant percentage of the supply of oil worldwide. It's like trying to take out any major oil producing nation. It's not smart. It's going to destabilize the oil markets. And so the White House has been trying to remedy that by going and making amends with Venezuela and Iran. And so Iran knows, hey, what are they going to do? Are they going to try and sanction us some more when they want to buy our oil because we bombed their consulate? And by we, I mean Iran bombing the U.S.'s consulate. Not that I'm saying that I'm a part of Iran. I was speaking from their perspective. And predictably, the White House and the United States in general is going to let this slip. We're just going to kind of move on, pretend it didn't happen, which is as expected. So it shows, the Iranians made the correct calculus that, the U.S. is not in a position to get upset about this. So moving on to the next missile attack, which I think was the more consequential one, the more important one, that would be the one in Ukraine, launched against the Ukrainian Foreign Legion's training camp in far western Ukraine, apparently near the Polish border. The Russians lobbed, I don't know, maybe this is an exaggerated number, but I heard as many as like 30 missiles. I don't know if maybe these just weren't very big missiles. I saw some of the video of it. There was definitely multiple impacts, and they were making some pretty big booms. Now, I think the official numbers from the Ukrainians was something like around 100. I saw like 118 or something. The Russians were saying more like 200, or maybe the Ukrainians were saying like 40 or 50. It seems like the Ukrainians would claim that it was, that it would be less than half of what the Russians would say. But who knows what the range of estimates were? Needless to say, a lot of guys who were these Ukrainian Foreign Legion types, these guys who have come from Western Europe, from America, to a lot of them being veterans of the War on Terror, others just being virtue signaling Redditors, if the what we've been seeing on Reddit is any indication. It seems like a lot of Redditors have decided to join the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. Those people were blown to bits by the Russians. It has been, it seems to be confirmed by both sides that this was an intentional targeting of the Foreign Legion guys, that they specifically wanted to attack the foreigners who came to Ukraine to fight on Ukraine's side, to send them a message, to discourage people from going there, to scare them off. And you can get anecdotes from individual soldiers who have deserted. I don't know if that is universal, if that's a majority of the guys who survived this attack, if they're saying, damn, I'm out of here, or if that's just a handful of guys, because you're always going to have some guys who are scared off as soon as they see the first real combat. I mean, that's human nature. It's not normal to kill other people, and it's not normal to see people being killed, and it's not normal to fear other people killing you. So it's totally understandable that they would have a lot of deserters after something like this. But the question is it completely disintegrating? Is this short-lived idea of foreigners flying to Ukraine or flying to Poland and then crossing the border into Ukraine to fight in their army? Has that already disintegrated? That I don't know. The Russians obviously would like it very much if that were the case. The Russians very much have made it clear that they resent this idea of foreigners coming and fighting in the war. Keep in mind, these units are going to be made up of guys who are very romantic about the whole situation, who think, hey, I'm going to go fight against the awful Ruski hordes and defend, Western civilization in Ukraine and push, the borders of Western society further east. And a lot of them who are veterans are used to fighting against insurgents, guys in flip-flops with AKs, people who have never had air support. They're used to totally being on the side with unquestioned air superiority. They are used to being able to be the ones calling in airstrikes. Even the people who have engaged in combat are not used to missiles flying towards them. They're not used to psychologically that ever being a possibility. And then as for the Redditors, the other contingent of the Ukrainian international brigades, if you want to borrow a phrase from the Spanish Civil War, although the analogy doesn't quite fit, because of course the international brigades were communists. They weren't on the side of the Nazi sympathizers. I think it's a sign, what the Russians did here, that they are no longer playing around, that they are very serious about this, that they are not. I think that they're not looking down upon their enemies in Ukraine as much as they did going in. They're not, and by looking down, I don't even necessarily mean like in a negative way. I think that they look down on them in that they question their resolve and thought that, hey, if we move in and we make it clear, hey, we're here, that everybody would just surrender, or at least a vast majority of the folks there would surrender and say, you know what, it's not worth fighting, we can't lose, or we can't win anyway. And perhaps the resolve of the people who support, I guess, the NATO mission in Ukraine was a bit stronger than the Russians anticipated. And by that, I don't mean to try and echo the narrative of, oh, well, it's just, the only reason why the Russians aren't in Kiev yet is because of the fierce Ukrainian resistance. No, I don't mean like that. I mean that the fact that they are wanting to fight it all. And so the Russians essentially thought that these people have no resolve and they will crumble in a matter of days rather than weeks. Well, it's been days, and they haven't completely crumbled yet. And so I think that this is the Russians trying to break their resolve, which it's yet to be seen yet how effective it will be. But at the end of the day, it is hopeless. These people can't win. We are hearing more and more that the humanitarian corridors are moving forward. People are getting out, and as civilians empty out these cities, the Russians can move in to take them. Yes, there will be fighters left behind who will try and resist the Russians, but they will be completely cut off from the outside world, and their demise will be a matter of when, not if. And again, I don't say that with joy. I don't like wars. I don't take pleasure in any of this. But it is what it is. People can try and grade Ukraine's performance on a curve all they want. They can say, oh, look, the Russians are doing so bad, compared to how you might expect. They're losing X amount of tanks or planes or what have you. They're running out of fuel. All of these anecdotes that we hear, supposedly telling us, oh, Russia's doing so bad. Well, no matter how bad they're doing, they're not doing as bad as the Ukrainians because the Russians keep gaining ground. The Russians keep taking territory. And as long as they're making positive progress, the Ukrainians are losing. War is a zero-sum game. If your enemies are gaining ground, you're losing ground. If you're losing ground, you're losing the war. And if you're losing the war, that means your enemy, Russia, is winning the war. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.